The Pacific Ocean crashed against the cliffs below our suite in Big Sur. A wild, percussive rhythm that should have been the soundtrack to our perfect beginning. Inside, a fire crackled, casting flickering gold light on the silk sheets and the half-empty bottle of champagne. Our honeymoon. 2 weeks of blissful seclusion where the world outside ceased to exist. Julian, my husband of 14 days, was in the shower. The sound of water, a distant hiss. I smiled, tracing the rim of my champagne flute, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the wine. This was it, the fairy tale. A low battery warning blinked on my phone. I remembered Julian packing his power bank in his carry-on, the sleek black one I'd bought him. I slid off the bed, my bare feet sinking into the plush rug, and knelt before his leather weekender bag by the fireplace. I unzipped the main compartment, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and bergamot wafting out. My fingers sifted past a cashmere sweater and a novel, searching for the familiar hard rectangle of the charger. Instead, they brushed against something small and firm, tucked deep into a side pocket. A small, velvet-covered box. My heart gave a little flutter. Another surprise. He had already been so generous, showering me with affection and thoughtful little gifts throughout our courtship. I pulled it out. It was a simple black velvet box, the kind a ring or earrings would come in. I opened it, a curious smile on my lips, expecting to see a sparkle, but there was no gem inside. Nestled in the satin lining was a single, cold object, a small, metallic USB drive, fashioned from brushed silver. It was heavy, clinical. Etched onto its surface was a single, élégant letter "su." It felt alien in my hand, a piece of cold machinery amidst the romantic warmth of our honeymoon suite. It didn't fit. I was still staring at it when the sound of the shower stopped. "Un moment later," Julian walked out. A white towel knotted around his waist. His dark hair slicked back. He was smiling, a relaxed, easy smile that made my stomach flip. "What have you found?" "My love," he asked, his voice light. I held it up. "I was just looking for your power bank." "What's this?" The change was instantaneous and terrifying. The smile didn't just vanish. It was ripped from his face. For one unguarded second, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, a flash of pure, undiluted panic. His body tensed. He moved across the room in 2 quick strides and snatched the USB drive from my hand, his fingers closing around it with possessive force. "Don't touch that," he snapped. His voice was sharp, cutting through the cozy atmosphere like a shard of glass. I flinched, startled by his tone. "Julian, I just found it." "What is it?" He took a breath, and the mask of the charming, loving husband slid back into place, but his eyes remained cold. "I'm sorry. Elara. I didn't mean to snap." He held up the drive. "It's sensitive client data. Extremely confidential. I shouldn't even have it with me. It's a force of habit." He gave a short, unconvincing laugh. "You know my work. Financial consulting for high-net-worth individuals. Privacy is everything." He walked over to his briefcase, clicked it open, and buried the drive deep inside, the snap of the locks echoing in the sudden silence. I stood there, my hand still outstretched, feeling a chill that the fire couldn't ward off. It wasn't just his reaction, it was the lie. I didn't know what the truth was, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that what he had just told me was a lie. The rest of the honeymoon passed under a strange haze. He was attentive, charming, but a fragile wall of glass now stood between us. The drive back to our new home in San Francisco was quiet. The vibrant coastal landscape blurred past, unseen. At home, the glass wall between us thickened into a fortress. The man who had pursued me with romantic fervor, who couldn't keep his hands off me as we strolled through Golden Gate Park, was gone. In his place was a polite, distant roommate. He moved into the guest bedroom on our first night back, claiming he had early conference calls and didn't want to disturb me. The excuse felt flimsy, insulting. A week later, I tried to bridge the chasm. I'd made his favorite dinner, put on the soft jazz he loved, and wore a dress he'd once said made my eyes sparkle. As he sat across from me, scrolling through his phone, I reached for his hand. He pulled it back, as if he'd been burned. "Julian, please, talk to me," I whispered, the words aching in my throat. "We're married, but you won't touch me. You won't even look at me." He finally put his phone down, his expression one of weary annoyance. "Ilara, we've talked about this. I'm under a lot of pressure at work. I just need some space." "This isn't about space," I insisted, my voice trembling. "This is a rejection." "No, it's about respecting boundaries," he said, his voice hardening. "My body is my own. Marriage doesn't grant you ownership over it. You need to respect that." The words were technically correct, the kind of language you'd hear in a therapist's office. But from his lips, they felt like weapons, perfectly crafted to make me the unreasonable one, the demanding wife. The loving gestures and whispered promises of our 8-month courtship felt like a distant, fabricated memory. Now, his life was filled with secrets. He took his phone calls on the balcony, his back turned to the glass door. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see his posture change. He would relax, lean against the railing, and a genuine, warm smile would spread across his face, a smile he never showed me anymore. The calls were long, intimate. He was sharing his life with someone, but it wasn't me. The weekends became his business trips. He would pack his weekender bag, the same one from our honeymoon, and leave on a Friday afternoon, not returning until late Sunday night, looking exhausted but strangely content. My questions about his work, his clients, his colleagues were met with vague deflections about confidentiality agreements and market-sensitive information. After 6 weeks of this Cold War, I knew I couldn't go on. The beautiful home we were supposed to fill with love and laughter felt like a gilded cage, and the man I had married was a stranger. One evening, as he was getting ready for another trip, I took a deep breath. "Julian," I said, my voice carefully neutral, "I think we should see a marriage counselor. This distance between us, it's not healthy." His head snapped up from the tie he was knotting. Again, I saw that flash of something in his eyes, not just panic this time, but genuine fear. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a firm, dismissive frown. "We don't need a counselor. Ilara," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Every couple has an adjustment period. You're being overly dramatic. We just need time." But I knew it wasn't about time. The man I married was keeping a secret so monumental that the thought of a third party listening to us in a quiet room terrified him. And as he walked out the door, briefcase in hand, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of our home, I made a vow. I would find out what that secret was. My fairy tale had become a mystery, and I was going to solve it. The following Friday morning, I put the first piece of my own plan into motion. I found Julian in the kitchen, impeccably dressed, sipping an espresso as he scanned the news on his tablet. He looked so normal, so handsome and composed. A wave of doubt washed over me. Was I crazy? Was I inventing a conspiracy where there was only a man struggling with the pressures of a new marriage? I pushed the thought away, clinging to the memory of his panicked eyes in Big Sur. "I was thinking of flying down to San Diego this weekend," I announced, my voice much steadier than I felt. "To see my parents. I haven't seen them since the wedding." He looked up from his tablet, his green eyes meeting mine. For a moment, he seemed to be searching my face, and my heart hammered against my ribs. But then his expression softened into one of mild approval. "That's a great idea. Ilara, you should. It'll be good for you to get away." He paused, taking another sip of espresso. "I'll have that conference in Seattle, so the house would have been empty anyway." The casual way he said it, the clear relief that I would be gone, was the only confirmation I needed. The doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. That evening, As he was packing his weekender, he felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a scene from a movie. He was humming, a cheerful, tuneless sound that made my skin crawl. When the sound of the shower started, I moved. His laptop was on the desk in our home office, a sleek silver machine that held his entire life. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. The login screen glowed, asking for a password. My mind raced. What would he use? Something simple, complex. Then it hit me. A cruel little twist of irony. I typed in the numbers 1008. October 8th. The day we met at a charity gala. The screen unlocked instantly. My breath hitched. I was in. For a moment. I just sat there, my mind blank with the sheer transgression of it. I was violating his privacy, crossing a line I never thought I would cross in a marriage. A wave of guilt and shame washed over me. What if I'm wrong? But then I remembered the coldness, the lies, the phone calls on the balcony. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was an investigator. His desktop was organized, almost obsessively so. Folders were neatly labeled client portfolios, market analyses, contracts. I clicked through them, finding nothing but what looked like legitimate financial documents. My hope began to sink. Maybe he was just a private, difficult man. Maybe I was the one destroying everything. I was about to close the laptop when I noticed something odd. A folder named Archive, but its icon was generic, almost invisible against the desktop background. It was designed to be overlooked. My heart pounded as I double-clicked it. It was password protected. Frustrated, I almost gave up. I tried our wedding date. Access denied. I tried his birthday. Access denied. With a surge of desperate intuition, I typed the initial from the USB drive. SBIT, followed by the date from our honeymoon when I found it. The folder opened, and my world fell apart. It wasn't filled with love letters to another woman. It was worse. It was filled with me. File after file, all meticulously labeled. Elara Vance, Asset Portfolio. Elara Vance, Trust Fund Prospectus. Elara Vance, Inheritance Schedule. I clicked on the first one. It was a complete breakdown of my financial worth. Details I had only ever shared with my own financial advisor. He had everything. My stock holdings, my real estate investments, my savings. The next file was a scan of my grandmother's trust, the one she had left me, with paragraphs highlighted in yellow, detailing the payout schedules and clauses. Then I saw the last file. Prenuptial agreement. Final. I opened it. It was our prenup, the one his lawyer had drafted, the one he'd called a simple formality to protect us both. He had rushed me through it, and in my love-drunk haze, I had barely read the fine print. Now, I saw his annotations in the margins of the scanned document. A clause I had thought was standard was circled in red. It stipulated that if a divorce was filed by either party within the first year of marriage for any reason, all premarital assets would be divided 50/50. It was financial slaughter, and I had signed my own death warrant. A choked sob escaped my lips. This wasn't a marriage. It was a hostile takeover. I grabbed my phone and, with shaking hands, photographed every single document on the screen. Then I deleted the recent folder history, closed the laptop, and placed it back on the desk exactly as I had found it, just as the water in the shower shut off. The next Monday, I didn't go to work. I went to the offices of Sterling & Associates, a law firm specializing in high-stakes family law. Patricia Sterling was a woman in her 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I laid out my story, my voice flat and emotionless as I showed her the photos on my phone. She listened without interruption, her expression growing more grave with each piece of evidence. "This is methodical," she said when I finished. "This is beyond a simple case of a gold-digging husband. Mrs. Vance, the level of research he did on you before you even met suggests a predatory pattern. We need more than just this. We need to know who he is and who S is." She slid a business card across her mahogany desk. I work with the best Michael Donovan. He's a private investigator, ex-SFPD. He's discreet, and he is relentless. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Mr. Donovan's small, cluttered office. He was a compact man, with watchful eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I told the story again. He took notes, nodding slowly. "The plan is simple," he said. "Julian claims to work at a financial firm downtown. Tomorrow, when he goes to work, I'll follow him. Let's see where he actually spends his days." The next day felt like an eternity. I waited by my phone, jumping at every notification. Finally, at noon, Donovan called, but his voice was tight with frustration. "We have a problem," he said. I was on his tail, but a 5-car pileup on the Bay Bridge has the whole area gridlocked. I lost him. He could be anywhere. My stomach dropped. The plan had failed at the first hurdle. It felt like a terrible omen. "So that's it, we just wait." "No," Donovan said, a determined edge to his voice. "We pivot. I'm still downtown. I'm going to the building he claims his office is in. I'll do it the old-fashioned way." An hour later, he called back. "Okay, got something. There's no Croft Financial in this building. Never has been. The front desk has never heard of him. But I got friendly with the mailroom guy. Turns out a Julian Croft rents a private P.O. box here. I persuaded him to check the forwarding address on file for the box." He paused for effect. "All mail sent to Julian Croft at this prestigious San Francisco address is immediately forwarded to a residential property in Lake Tahoe." Lake Tahoe, the place we had talked about visiting for a ski trip. A place he claimed to have never been. The lie was unraveling. I took this new piece of information back to Patricia Sterling's office. I felt a sliver of victory, of control, but the look on her face wiped it away. "Lake Tahoe," she repeated. "Herfingerstiepel. Justine, the fact that he has a second residence he's hidden from you is a massive red flag. Given the financial documents you found, and now this, I have to ask you to prepare yourself. We may be looking at something far more serious than financial fraud. We might be looking at a man who is already married." The word married hung in the air of Patricia Sterling's office, heavy and suffocating. My own marriage was a sham, a meticulously constructed stage play, and I was the only one who hadn't been given a script. The possibility that my role was the other woman in my own life was a new, horrifying thought. "We need definitive proof." "Mr. Donovan said, his voice cutting through my daze. He met my eyes, his expression serious. "We need to hear it from his own mouth." He reached into his briefcase and placed a tiny black object on the polished table between us. It was no bigger than a button. A recording device, state-of-the-art, motion-activated and capable of recording for 48 hours. "I need you to plant this in his home office, somewhere he won't see it. Under his desk, behind the bookshelf." My blood ran cold. The idea of planting a bug, of spying on my own husband in our home, felt like a profound violation. My hands began to tremble. I don't know if I can do that." Donovan's gaze softened slightly. "Ilara," he said, using my first name for the first time. "The man you married doesn't exist. You are dealing with a predator. Right now. He holds all the cards. This device will help you take your power back. It's the only way to protect yourself." That night, the small device felt like a lead weight in my pocket. I waited until Julian was on one of his long, private phone calls on the balcony. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs as I slipped into the office. The room was dark, save for the moonlight filtering through the window. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. I knelt by his desk, the rough underside of the wood scraping my knuckles as I fumbled to attach the magnetic recorder. For a second, my finger slipped, and the device clattered softly against the desk leg. I froze, holding my breath, certain he would hear. But the low murmur of his voice from the balcony continued uninterrupted. With a final surge of adrenaline, I secured it in place and crept out of the room. my body shaking with a toxic mix of fear and resolve. I spent a sleepless night. Then, a day of agonizing waiting. That evening, after Julian had left for his Seattle conference, I retrieved the device. I sat in my car, parked a block away from the house I no longer considered a home, and plugged the recorder into my laptop. I put on my headphones, my hands so slick with sweat I could barely operate the trackpad. I clicked play. End quote. For an hour, there was nothing but silence. Then, I heard the familiar sound of his office door closing, his footsteps, the creak of his leather chair, a phone dialing, and then, his voice, the warm, intimate voice I had once believed was reserved for me. "Hey, it's me," he said, and then a woman's voice, soft and familiar sounding, murmured on the other end. "I know. Baby, I miss you, too," Julian said, and the tenderness in his voice was a physical blow. "This whole situation is more complicated than I expected, but I promise it'll be over soon." A pause. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's actually making it easier by pulling away herself. I think she's planning to file for divorce, which would solve all our problems." My stomach churned. He wasn't just deceiving me, he was counting on my own pain to do his work for him. Then his tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Listen, they called again about the debt. The deadline is firm. We need the transfer from the trust fund to happen the second the divorce papers are filed." He sighed, a sound of genuine weariness. I almost told her. Last night. She looked at me with this hope in her eyes. I almost couldn't go through with it. There was a brief silence. But we're too far in now. This is the only way out. Once the papers are signed, I can access the trust and transfer everything. The prenup she signed is ironclad. He was talking about me like a business transaction. An obstacle. A solution to a debt. He and this woman, S, the initial from the USB drive, had orchestrated my entire life for the past year. He went on, asking about her day, about her work, making plans for their weekend together in Lake Tahoe. He was everything to her that he refused to be to me: attentive, loving, a partner. The next morning, I met with Donovan and played him the recording. He listened intently, his face grim. "We've got him on intent to commit fraud. This is excellent." He pulled out a file, and I have an update on the Lake Tahoe property. He slid a document across the table. It was a copy of a marriage certificate from the state of Nevada, issued 1 year ago. The names on the certificate were Julian Croft and Serafina Croft. Serafina, save for one. So he's a bigamist. I whispered, the room starting to tilt. "It's worse than that," Donovan said gently. He slid another document forward. It was a copy of Serafina Croft's birth certificate. I scanned the lines, my eyes catching on the names listed as parents. Then I looked at a copy of Julian's birth certificate next to it. The parents' names were identical. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Amanda Wilson was born." "Amanda Caldwell," Donovan explained, his voice low and steady. "They're not husband and wife. Ilara, they're brother and sister." A wave of nausea so profound washed over me that I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. The loving phone calls, the shared home, the intimate partnership. It was all a lie built on an even more grotesque truth. It was an incestuous criminal conspiracy. I felt physically sick, violated in a way I couldn't even process. "They've been running this scheme for at least 5 years," Donovan continued, his voice pulling me back from the brink. "We've identified 3 other wealthy women in different states. Same pattern. Whirlwind romance. Quick marriage to Julian, followed by financial ruin and his disappearance. Serafina plays the role of the devoted wife back home, providing a legitimate front for his operations." He opened another folder, this one filled with glossy photographs. Surveillance photos from Lake Tahoe. There was Julian and Serafina, holding hands over dinner, laughing. There they were, entering their shared apartment. And then the most damning picture of all, a telephoto shot through their window, capturing Julian at a desk, working on a laptop. Next to him was a small, professional-grade machine, a high-end ID card printer. On the desk were several blank cards and what looked like forged driver's licenses. "He's not just a con man," Donovan said. "He's a professional forger. They create whole new identities for each target. The man you married, the financial consultant, none of it was real." I stared at the photos, at the life he lived with his sister, a life funded by the destruction of women like me. The man in those pictures was a complete stranger. The confusion and heartbreak I had felt for weeks solidified into something harder, colder. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. Patricia Sterling looked at me, her expression firm. "Elara, we have enough to destroy them. We have them on wire fraud, conspiracy, bigamy, identity theft. We can take this to the FBI right now." "What's the next step?" I asked, my voice devoid of the tremors that had plagued it for weeks. Donovan leaned forward. "Now," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. "We set a trap." The plan, laid out in the sterile conference room of the FBI's San Francisco field office, was both terrifyingly simple and elegantly cruel. We would give Julian exactly what he wanted. I would be the heartbroken wife, unable to cope with a cold and distant marriage, who decides to walk away. My filing for divorce would be the green light he was waiting for, the starting gun for his final move. Federal agents, working with financial institutions in Nevada, would be waiting for him at the finish line. "Are you sure you can do this?" Elara Agent Miller, the lead investigator, asked. "You'll have to face him, lie to him, and make him believe it. It's going to be the performance of your life." I looked from her to Patricia Sterling, then to Donovan. I thought of the women before me, of the life he and his sister had built on the ruins of other people's trust. "I can do it," I said, my voice a steady, low thing I barely recognized as my own. He's a great actor, but so am I. The next evening, I waited for him to come home. I had spent the day preparing, not my lines, but my emotional state. I dredged up all the genuine pain and confusion he had put me through in the last 2 months. I didn't have to fake the tears. They were real, just repurposed for my final act. He walked in, and I presented him with the divorce papers, which Patricia had drafted to look completely standard. His reaction was a masterpiece of feigned shock and sorrow. He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands, the very picture of a devastated husband. I don't understand." "Elara," he stammered, looking up at me, his green eyes wide with practiced hurt. "I know things have been difficult. I thought we just needed time. I can't do this anymore. Julian," I cried, letting the real tears flow. "I can't live with a ghost. I'm so lonely. I need a husband. A partner. Not whatever this is." He stood up and walked towards me. My entire body tensed, a primal urge to recoil fighting against the role I had to play. He pulled me into an embrace, his arms wrapping around me. It felt like being held by a snake. His scent, the sandalwood and bergamot I had once loved, now smelled like decay. "I'm so sorry it's come to this," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with false regret. "I know I haven't been the husband you deserved. Maybe some time apart will help us both figure out what we really want." The recording device in my pocket captured every lying, manipulative word. I pulled away, wiping my tears. "I'll be staying with my parents in San Diego while this is sorted out," I said, delivering the final piece of the bait. I would be hundreds of miles away, leaving him free and clear to execute his plan. The next morning, Patricia filed the papers at the San Francisco County Courthouse. I sat in her car outside, my hands clenched in my lap, my phone face up on my knee. An hour passed, then another. The waiting was a unique form of torture. Finally, at 1130 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Donovan. "He's moving. Left the house with the weekender. Serafina picked him up. They're heading east on I-80. My heart began to race. It was happening. I pictured them in the car, likely celebrating, believing they had won, that their perfect plan was coming to fruition. They were driving toward their fortune, completely unaware they were driving into a federal sting operation. For the next 4 hours, updates came in sporadically. Crossed into Nevada. Approaching Reno. Subjects have entered the First National Bank on Virginia Street. FBI assets are in position. I stared at the last message. My breath held tight in my chest. I imagined the cool, quiet interior of the bank. Julian sliding forged documents across the counter to a teller, who was actually an undercover agent. The final, arrogant move. Then, my phone buzzed one last time. Package delivered. Both subjects in custody. You can go home. Elara. It's over. I closed my eyes and a single, heavy breath. I didn't realize I'd been holding for months, shuddered out of me. It wasn't a feeling of triumph. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge. It was just relief. A profound, bone-deep relief that the long, dark night was finally over. The arraignment was 2 weeks later in a federal courtroom in Reno. I sat in the back, a spectator to the final implosion of the life I'd almost had. When they led them in, I barely recognized them, dressed in orange jumpsuits, their wrists and ankles shackled. Julian and Serafina looked small and pathetic. The confident composure was gone, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed fear. Julian's eyes darted around the courtroom, wild and disbelieving. The prosecutor read the list of charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, bigamy. When his eyes finally found mine across the courtroom, I saw the exact moment understanding dawned. I saw him connect the dots. My sudden decision to file for divorce. My disappearance to San Diego. The shock on his face curdled into a mask of pure panic as the full weight of his miscalculation crashed down on him. He hadn't been the predator. He had been the prey. I hadn't been his mark. I had been his hunter. His court-appointed lawyer requested bail. The prosecutor shut it down immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Croft is an extreme flight risk with a demonstrated history of creating false identities and fraudulent relationships across multiple states. The government requests he be held without bail. The judge agreed. As the bailiffs led him away, his perfect plan in ashes around him, he looked back at me one last time. There was no hatred in his eyes. No anger. Only a hollow, defeated disbelief. In the end, Trevor Caldwell received a 15-year federal sentence. His sister, Serafina, received 10 for her role as an accomplice. The investigation, spurred by my case, uncovered a trail of devastation spanning 5 states and nearly $3 million stolen from their victims, all of which was eventually recovered and returned. Their names became synonymous with a particularly cold and calculated form of romantic predation, ensuring they would never manipulate another vulnerable person again. I didn't celebrate with champagne or a lavish party. I celebrated quietly, with a simple dinner surrounded by the few people who had known the truth and supported me. Looking back, I realized the man I thought I loved had never really existed. He was a phantom, a character created for the sole purpose of deception. The betrayal, as devastating as it was, had given me an unexpected gift. It had forced me to find a strength I never knew I possessed. It taught me to trust that quiet, persistent voice inside that whispers when something is wrong. The revenge I got wasn't just about seeing him in handcuffs. It was about reclaiming my story, my power, and my future. It was about ensuring that the darkness he tried to bring into my life would instead become a beacon, a warning to others. If my story has touched you, if it serves as a reminder to always trust your own intuition when something feels wrong, then please, share it. Like this video, subscribe for more stories of survival and justice, and leave a comment below. You are never as alone as you think you are in your fight.